everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. I call this workshop meeting of January 5th, 2026 to order at 6:30 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Mitchum,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Elgin, Councilmember Bailey,
Here.
Councilmember Davis,
Here.
Councilmember Debner,
Here.
Councilmember Lasher, Councilmember Randolph.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Can everybody here in the audience on the mics? Okay, so let's make sure.
Nope. Yeah.
If you want mine.
Thank you. So the first item on our agenda tonight is the Americans with Disabilities ADA Public Outreach Meeting with Mile High Accessibility. Ken and Ryan are here with us tonight to present the results of the survey. And they're going to stay seated so that they're talking to both the members of the community who are here with us tonight in person and to people who are online and to all together. And you have the floor. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for showing up on this chilly evening to go over the ADA Public Outreach Meeting. As far as protocol goes, please feel free to interrupt at any point during the presentation if you have a question or a comment. This meeting is all about you. It's designed to show you what the results are from our previous public outreach efforts. It also gives you an opportunity to make comments and provide feedback for us as well. So thank you again for being here, and we will get started. Just a quick introduction to the Americans with Disabilities Act. It was a federal law. It's a civil rights law that was signed into effect in 1990. It also prohibits disability-based discrimination, requires equal access to programs, services, activities, as well as accessible facilities and the programs that are available in those facilities. The town engaged Mile High accessibility consultants to help assist them with developing a transition plan and performing an ADA self-evaluation on their programs, policies, and services. The transition plan basically outlines the methodology to evaluate facilities and the public right-of-way. We not only evaluated the town's facilities, which would be the church and town hall and town park, but we also evaluated the sidewalks throughout the community. The transition plan will provide a framework for improvements over the next decade, at least, and supports inclusive policies, programs, and activities. The requirements of the Americans with Disability Act include program accessibility, equal participation, reasonable modifications when requested from the citizens of the town of Mountain View, integration of services, also effective communication. It requires the town to name and publicize an ADA coordinator. And it also requires a public notice of the ADA requirements, as well as a procedure to handle any grievances within the community. The purpose of the ADA transition plan is that it will serve as a roadmap towards the town achieving compliance with the ADA and accessibility. It also will identify the strategies to remove physical and programmatic barriers, and it applies to facilities, public rights of way, programs, and services. And the transition plan will include a list of barriers and a time frame to remove those barriers and the methods for removing them as well. The scope of the transition plan included us evaluating the town's policies and practices and procedures. We provided policy templates for the town to incorporate and to be approved by the town council. It also involves public outreach, and I just want to say public outreach is probably one of the most important functions of the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. It gives the community an opportunity to say what's important to them and where they need some accommodations, or where there are some barriers to accessibility that are important to them. We also did a survey, like I said, of the town hall and the town park and this church and the public right.
Okay, Mile High Accessibility Consultants provided the town with public. Perfect. Okay, Mile High Accessibility Consultant provided the town with public outreach survey questions. The town did pass those out to each residential property within the town limits. The purpose of the town surveys was to have public feedback on accessibility within the town. So this included to identify any barriers to access, evaluate the effectiveness of existing policies and procedures, helps Mountain View understand the priority of residents and stakeholders. Survey responses were and are confidential. The results guide the town in planning and implementing accessibility improvements moving forward, and should be widely available. We are going to provide those surveys for an additional month after this meeting to ensure that we gather all the information from the residents and make sure we give you guys enough time to fill out those surveys. I'm going to go through the survey results for I think we had 17 surveys filled out so far. We're hoping to get more feedback from the public moving forward. Again, that's why we're extending it another month. And if we need to, we can extend it indefinitely. So for Mountain View's overall accessibility rating, generally, so the biggest thing was generally accessible, but could be improved. Highly accessible, 29% of people agreed. 24% was accessible with few challenges, and then 12% not accessible at all. The next question was, how well does the town policies and procedures support people with disabilities? 47% of surveys responded not sure. 29% somewhat think it's accessible. 24% needs improvement, and then 0% was very well. The next question in the survey asked if you knew if you knew who to contact for assistance, having a concern or a complaint or need accommodations regarding accessibility. 65% of survey responses said yes. The remaining 35% said no. The responses for the yes contacts were town hall with 6 responses, police with 2, town clerk 1, the mayor 3, town council 2, and public works 2. The next question on the survey: experienced or observed a situation where you were unable to participate in a program, access information, or obtain services due to the following: building not accessible, 6%, educational program not accessible, 11%, activity or event not accessible, 6%, website not accessible, 11%, material not available in alternative format, 11%, interpreter not provided, 0%, not applicable, 49%, other 6%. We asked the surveys if they've ever requested accommodation for a disability from the town. 82% said no, 12% said yes, and 6% there was no response. The next question was to check all programs, services, or activities in which you took participate at a town facility. 27% said recreation, 27% said meetings. 11% said volunteer works, 32% events, and then 3% for other. Mountain View general questions. These were 3 questions we asked with just a yes or no response. Does anyone use a wheelchair, electric wheelchair, or other seated rolling assistive devices? Out of the 17 responses we got, 100% said no. The next question was, do you use a walker, crutches, or other walking assisted devices? 82% said no, 18% said yes. Are you blind or do you have low vision? 94% said no, with 6% saying yes. Another question for the survey, do you live in the town of Mountain View? 88% of the respondents said yes, with 12% saying no. Do you work in the town of Mountain View? 76% said no, 24% said yes. Do you regularly shop in or visit the town of Mountain View? 82% said yes, 18% no. Will you attend Mountain View's public meeting on January 5th? 47% said no, with 53% yes. The next part of the survey, we did a sidewalk conditions ranking. This was just a question on accessibility issues within the public right of way, all the public sidewalks, residential sidewalks, building sidewalks. So we'll go through that result right now. Missing or inadequate cane detectable warning surfaces. These are the truncated domes for curb ramps. They said least. Missing or inadequate audible crossing information. Another least, there's probably, I think there's only one signalized intersection within the town.
Are you saying that these are the least important to them, or the most important to the?
Yes,
The least important.
sorry for not explaining that. These, the red column is the least important to the residents that filled out the survey. Moderate would be right in the middle, and then important at the end. You're welcome. So another least concern of the residents that filled out the survey is missing or inadequate audible crossing information. Those are signalized intersections. Missing or inadequate turning spaces, that is the top landing at the curb ramp at each corner. Movable objects that block access, so this would be furniture on sidewalks from businesses. Fixed objects blocking access. Then moderate, we have severe slope changes, steep cross slopes, steep curb ramp slopes, missing curb ramps, slippery surfaces. And then the most important sidewalk conditions that the residents are concerned about are sidewalks that have cracks, bumps, so tripping hazards, lifted panels from tree roots, and overgrown vegetation. Accessible sidewalk location ranking, again, least being the least concern, important being the most important concern for them. So these are locations of sidewalks that we performed maybe an assessment on. So people were least concerned about the sidewalks around the little free libraries, around the school, and office buildings or other places of employment. Moderate concern was retail areas and medical facilities. And then the most important is the park in town hall. Okay, so these were general questions that were handwritten by some of the folks that performed or filled out the survey. So in your opinion, what should be the town's highest priority to improve accessibility for people with disabilities? These are comments straight from the survey, so I'll just read them as they are. Fix ADA ramps at each crosswalk, widen Sheridan Boulevard sidewalk. I want to know how I can help when I'm home and not traveling for work. I'm happy to shovel folks' walks and cut their bushes blocking the walks. Sidewalks and corner ramps. Fixing the sidewalk to street transitions on 43rd. Improving the conditions of sidewalks, making sure they are smooth and that ramps are in proper places. In general, clean up public transportation areas, streets, sidewalks, alleys, overgrown vegetation. Sidewalks, street crossings, public and retail establishments. Not sure. We'll leave it up to what people with disabilities need and voice for themselves. Here's another question we asked. We have two more questions. The next one is, in your opinion, what should be the town's highest priority to improve accessibility for people with disabilities? Abide by regulations. I would guess focus on public-owned space. I would assume that private property owners should bear costs of meeting ADA on their properties, meet needs of public living in Mountain View, be sensible and watch costs. Consistency of all sidewalks, alley exits and entrances and corners. The yellow markings at corners are great and the alley entrances and exits should be consistently marked differently. I also think sidewalk snow removal is a problem. Improve access for visually handicapped citizens. Do not think the town has the scale of issue as the questionnaire suggests. Property owners / slumlords need to fix their problem. And the final question in the survey was, please provide any other information or suggestions that you feel would improve town accessibility. I have been traveling for 3 weeks. It dumped at my house and I didn't clean the sidewalks. I am happy to pay a fee for someone to help me. Would like to see residents embrace curb appeal for general visual calmness, enjoyment, and to encourage investors, new residents. Many properties are unfortunately trashy and are deterring comfortable living residency. I will personally volunteer for yard cleanup, dilapidated fences, broken furniture, overgrown, poorly maintained sidewalks. When snow plows move snow in front of driveways or parked vehicles, it's difficult for some people to gain access to the street. I have no idea how this could be fixed. The snow has to go somewhere, but it is something I've experienced and seen. The last comment, since past and current council members and mayor primarily drive the town and have possibly never walked on sidewalks that border Sheridan, 44th, 41st, 43rd, and Fenton, perhaps walking the town more often will give you an understanding of the few bad owners that do not take responsibility, slumlords, and absentee owners. Again, we'll keep this survey open for the time being in case you guys didn't get it or didn't have time to fill it out. And now is time for any feedback from the residents of town of Mountain View and any comments or concerns with the ADA self-evaluation and transition.
Anybody in the audience tonight wants to add additional thoughts or comment in any way on the presentation or the survey? The public comment rules don't apply, so you're welcome to just share your thoughts. You can come to life if you'd like, or you could just speak from the If there's any additional thoughts. All right, so we're gonna have one more month to collect more surveys. I'm gonna repeat that for the recording for people online. So she asked in the audience if there's gonna be one more month to collect the surveys.
Yes, that is correct, and, I guess maybe up to the town if we need to go past that month, but, for now, we'll keep it at one more month.
I'm gonna try to put the survey on the website as well, so that people can access it there, make it easier.
Yeah, and I think I need to talk to you about this, but opening up a comment section on the town's website for any of ADA concerns. That might come up in the future, or if anybody didn't want to say anything publicly, they can fill it out anonymous. And not,
Anonymously.
thank you. Online. And we're gonna incorporate everyone's feedback from the public into the transition plan. It helps us identify, when we do these transition plans for towns and cities, we identify ADA barriers just from a state and local government code and the 2010 ADA standards. However, it is a good opportunity for the town residents to voice their concerns that they have specific areas that lack accessibility that might, when we prioritize, we can start moving those priorities up based off the residents and what their needs are.
Are there any participants online who have questions or comments? Thank you very much for sharing all of that information. Councilmember Bailey.
I was wondering how many people actually attended, was there
There were 17.
17?
I think we gave them about 4 to 6 weeks initially, so yeah, we'll extend it another 4.
I think it was on the website, I thought there was a whole thing about having key responses, so if you did that, how would you, if it's all anonymous, how do you track that and how do you account for that?
That's a good question. I'm not a web developer. It would be up to your website content manager. There are different surveys that will, if you do like, there's several brands that I can email to you, Mayor, that will not allow you to submit a survey more than once.
Right, but if you're one of those 70 people, sorry,
Oh.
you don't know who those 70 people are, or, I mean,
That's true.
Folks just get as much input as we can, then maybe not prioritize that as much as people did. Maybe we put a mark in the sand here and say, you're recalibrating, because there are some things that we thought about afterwards, and some of the books that maybe there are ways to improve it. Maybe we start fresh and have a sort of just an ongoing thing to input.
You know, we talked about that. There were 2 questions that I would not include in a future public outreach survey. That would be one way to differentiate who had submitted. Well, maybe it wouldn't, but that would help, like you said, draw a line in the sand from the website survey to the handwritten ones.
All saying, you know, if people, if the community doesn't care about this, but they care about this, then that's all that we're gonna do with all of the input that we can get on this relevant info. Do other council members have questions or comments that they'd like to share? Councilmember Duffy?
I was just wondering who the current ADA coordinator is, and if that needs to be a council assignment.
No, it's not, I think it's a staff assignment, and currently we don't have anybody assigned, but it'll be. Other questions? Councilmember Davis?
Just like to say, most conditions are using what? Facts and some community parks that walk around docks most times, so. If you look at the streets. There's some lips, you guys, you prefer to.
And we provided all, so we did an assessment on all the sidewalks townwide, so we walked every foot of sidewalks that you guys have, so we were able to identify all the tripping hazards, marked where the vegetation growth, and that's a seasonal issue mostly. But yeah, overall, we've done this a lot for towns and cities. Yeah, I would say the sidewalks are generally in pretty good shape. And you're always gonna have sidewalks that settle over time or get heaped by tree roots, so. I think it's just nice to now know exactly where those locations are for the town to be able to address, and yeah, hopefully most of those tripping hazards can be ground down without replacing sidewalk panels. We try to provide alternate solutions for a cost-effective way to remediate these barriers.
So say, like, we've done assessments of our sidewalks and we've had like tiered levels of like priority for needing replacement and repair, but it's also, it's just a lot of this. That is part of your presentation, that it becomes not a code enforcement. You know, having tripping hazard, that's code enforcement, that's people doing their part. And if people taking care of their sidewalks, is the whole other responsibility. So it just seems the town needs to make sure that we're doing proper code enforcement for a lot.
Yes, and that's a common thing for every town and city that experiences this. The hardest part is trying to make residents responsible for keeping the sidewalks clear and free of overgrown vegetation. And we did this assessment last summer when we had a bunch of rain. So, you know, it's like I said, a seasonal thing on the vegetation, but yeah, absolutely comes down to code enforcement, and I know the town is working towards that, and we recommend having a policy if one's not in place for those items.
And just a quick comment too, in the draft transition plan and the final transition plan, I did have a section about the responsibility of residents to maintain sidewalks and overgrown vegetation. And I did cite the specific code for that, so that is available in the transition plan.
Way of doing it takes a lot of time. And so that's one of the things that has come out of working with Mile High Facilities, thinking about bringing that code back to council to consider, are there ways that we can improve that process so that it doesn't take quite as much if there's something that's really wrong in the sidewalk, and it maybe is something that public works assistant could cut back in less than 10 minutes. Maybe we, tell the community that we're going to handle those kinds of things, or it'll be up to council how to proceed with that. But I think it's worth having a conversation about how we handle it, and also snow removal. Because the snow removal, we have been doing a lot of work to improve that process, but I think I've seen some improvements over the last couple of years, but it is a consistent problem, and so I think it's worth having a conversation at the table about how we can do it. Do you have any recommendations for that? Do you have any thoughts of having worked with other municipalities in terms of like quick code enforcement for vegetation?
Yeah, so we worked with one of the neighboring cities, off Sheridan, and that was a really big issue for them, was the vegetation, and then getting the residents to responsibly take care of it in a reasonable time frame. They ended up hiring a full-time code enforcement person, and we went out and trained them on site what to look for. I mean, it doesn't take much, but and then you give them a letter in the mail, and that's at the town's discretion. Warnings are usually the best route versus fines, but sometimes you have to kind of go to extra measurements to get it taken care of. So I think that's what the neighboring city did, and like I said, they did hire a full-time code enforcement, and it was a bigger city, probably about 6 or 7 times the size of this, so not a massive city, but it was a full-time job. So I imagine with a town this size, it'd probably be a part-time job.
We do a series of steps right now where, we do a friendly reminder about the resident property owner's responsibility. And both the property owner and the resident, if it's a rental, get that friendly reminder. And then we also have flyers and little reminders, periodically, little ads and things like that. Trying not to, set it up so that we're going to war with our
Exactly.
community. And then we do, first citation is, sometimes in the mail, sometimes in person. Then we wait 7 days, and then we have a second citation. And then we wait 7 days again. And then we have a citation that gets certified, police, and then it goes to the court. And so it just, it's 21 days, that's basically when we have a public works assistant.
And it could grow back in 21 days. So, another thing I've seen in the past is the town or city will provide removal of the branches. So if they remove the shrubs and tree branches from the sidewalk and put them on the street, they'll have a company, a third party, come shred all the paper or wood up into a grinder and take them off. So that's another way you could do that. But like I said, it's a seasonal issue and it's gonna grow back. So that only solves the problem for a month or two.
But it solves the problem for that one, just trying to get past.
That's right.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, we have some questions or comments from
The sidewalk, they consider the homeowners.
the question was, are the sidewalks considered the homeowners of the town's responsibility? Is it-
Are they actually?
Sidewalk is the property. And the question was for people on the recording or in the room. Does the property owner need to have permission to grind it down? It really depends on the amount of work being done, so there's a permit required for large changes to the sidewalk, but I think that simple grinding doesn't require the permit, but I'd have to look at our code to be sure. I'll follow up with you on that. I think that you can grind it down. But I'll look at it. Yeah, thank you. Other question or discussion from council?
Just had one last comment. I think that, maybe we can sort of sell the community on why code enforcement is so important if we tie it into like these accessibility issues. I feel like if you understood that somebody in a wheelchair cannot get around town because of the lack of attention to a code enforcement matter, that's a big problem. Maybe if it even affects one person, that's not fair.
Good point.
Well, thank you very much for your time and all your effort helping us with these complicated issues.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys for your time.
Yes, appreciate it.
It's pretty common. You're welcome. Perfect. All right,
Thank you
guys.
again. Good night, everybody.
And if you're online, you could sign up in the chat and provide your name and contact information and the.
Jeff Kitty.
Plate here tonight, but
taking a picture of a collection sign. Still up, Mr. Mess's property. Belongs to you, Mayor. Believe there's a fine. Incurred and late removal. You don't have to give me an answer. You're not supposed to respond to me. Way past election year.
The draft of 2026 goals on. One facilitated conversation with Liz Walker. And each shared a lot of. You're trying to do in 2026, it's a really good conversation. I tried to listen closely to that conversation and craft my first take on what I think some of the priorities are. And then during the conversation, it was also brought up that it'd be nice to have a mission statement that sort of covers all of some of the areas in a broader way that are applicable. So I took a stab at some of those as well. And for people who are not on council, there's a sheet at the front of the room that has the draft of the mission options that were proposed and then the draft goals. And from here, it really is a council conversation to decide how you want to go. It sounds like I had some feedback from, I've got two written statements from council members. One is from council member Devner. And I think this is maybe since you have written statements, you'd like to two of you to share those thoughts so that it's a full discussion. That makes sense?
Before we get started, I just have a little statement I'd like to make, please. Yes, it is. Before we dive into the goals themselves, I'd like to pause for a moment to share where I am, and I welcome a brief round the table check in to hear where others are as well. The packet is impressive. However, based on the attorney's email, it appears premature. It is also clear, Mayor, that you are ahead of me in the process, and I believe ahead of other council members as well. As a specific example, the January Gazette includes drafted council goals. Those goals were seen by the public before they were seen by me, and I believe before other council members had an opportunity to review them. That is a problem for me. It feels disingenuous to review and discuss drafted goals after they've already been published. It leaves me feeling redundant and unneeded. When I reflect on our last meeting, I was left with the understanding that council input would be heard and valued. Seeing these drafted goals published before council review makes me feel that I was not listened to. I do not want to assume that this is the case. I'm trying to understand how this happened, and the only conclusion I can reach is that, Mayor, you are in a different place than I am, and perhaps other council members as well. I also want to be clear that we, as individual and uniquely elected voices, need the opportunity to review goals, discussion, and develop our own priorities and goals as council members, rather than reacting to the goals that have already been proposed or drafted by the mayor. This process matters. My question is, how do we bring this back together? I would like that. I want us to be aligned, transparent, and working collaboratively as a council. So in my goals of 2026, there's also copies on the table. I just took a stab at what I felt were important goals that are different than what was proposed. And then I also broke them down into objectives, and then also key performance indicators, which are called KPI, which gives us examples of how we can measure these goals. And then also on the back of this statement, I provided my own spin on a mission statement. So if everyone would like to take a look at those, and everyone, I hope everyone has brought in their own suggestions for goals, so that we can have a lively.
Yeah, so this is just a process that has been followed in the past, and this is up to the council. If you don't want to follow the process that I've laid out, I have absolutely no problem with that. It is up to the council. And so there's an attempt to try to listen to what was said at the facilitated meeting and summarize those. And if that's not reflected in that document, then it is absolutely a draft and you are welcome to start fresh from the beginning. The idea is to keep things moving forward and to have a real conversation about what the goals are. And if you start with this one, then could you summarize what for the table, how you would like the goals? That everybody can.
Sure. So I have 5 goals. I have public safety, professional services, and community trust.
Can you say? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on page 1 where it says goals 2023. Objective 1.
Everything is just one. I want to make sure I follow.
The first page is where
This
in,
is, I'm sorry. And put down how being brought today to the table, not in your packet, and it's part of. I just dropped mine, it was on.
that's
And, and it's 4 pages front and back, and so maybe, and then also just for clarity, the concept of the metrics, I think one of the things that council is very clear on in the last conversation is that metrics, having some metrics where you can measure throughout the year and for agenda items. I think that's very important, but it's not part of the initial goal. And so it might save us some time if we held off on the metrics. and
okay.
add that for the next one. So you're proposing a new set of goals with different categories. I think if you were able to relate them to the prior conversation and talk about how each one reflects what the body as a whole has already discussed, that might get us further.
Okay, let me grab that. These are what you created, is that, are you referring to those, or are you referring to your summary of the brainstorming session?
The conversation itself, it doesn't have to be my summary, it doesn't have to be any way in which I parsed it. It's the conversation itself which council has had at the last session. If my summary that was in the packet is helpful, then by all means use that. But mainly I want to make sure that we have already, that we're not discarding the work that's already been done in that facilitated conversation, so that we apply this back to, because what I'm fearful of is if every council member comes to the table with their own set of goals, how do we knit that together, right? And so we've already had one conversation where each council person talked about what they would like to see in 2026. So let's try to build on that conversation and how, what categories we have. Your fellow council members might say, oh, I like that. If you tie it back to what you've already heard them say.
Okay, so I've listened to the recording. And I gathered this information, but also I wanna tag on to your comment that the purpose of the workshop is, my understanding is that we all provide our own thoughts and ideas in addition to what we've been given, so that we all have this conversation tonight, not tagged on to what the brainstorming session was. That's part of, that's part of a workshop, is that, yes, we have some guidelines, but that we as individuals should be providing our own thoughts so that we can incorporate these into what each council member has to offer. I don't think it's starting again, but it's in addition to what we've already, yes, continue. Yeah, because this is a workshop. And so in order for us to be comfortable with this board to be comfortable with their own unique set of goals, I think that we have a base and that each individual needs to contribute what they think would be important.
So I want to make sure that I'm hearing that one council also, that we are, I think what I'm hearing here from some of you say is that she's not ready to move forward to synthesize what we worked on. She's wanting to continue to express individually what the project and goals look like for her and what's important at this individual stage, and then synthesize at a later stage. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that truly was my concern about seeing proposed goals in that before we had an opportunity to review.
And that's, I just took this process that we followed in the past. It meant no disrespect. It's totally fine to do it a different way. You just need to give me that direction and we will do it a different way. So, can we then, starting from there, I can hear you say that you would like to just start out individually, having a session where each council member to bring their version of the goal forward, and we don't try to see. Is everybody at the table comfortable with that? Other council members, how do other council members feel? Councilmember Jeff.
I guess I would share, the sentiment that Councilmember Alvin has, with, you know, the draft proposal being published in the paper. It does, you know, give the public a perception of what council's decided, and, you know, for good governance, I would think that we need to have that conversation first, and then it's the final product that council votes on that appears in the public paper.
I understand that perspective. Hopefully you also understand that I meant no disrespect, that we're following just the route that we've done in the past. That's it. Have a conversation, synthesize it, talk about it once or twice, and then move forward. But if council members do not want to follow that process, it's absolutely fine to not follow a different. And let's give each other the benefit of the doubt. We're all working. How do you feel about work? It's just bringing each individual rather than trying to synthesize it with the page, bringing your goals and them individually at this stage, changing the pace. How do you feel about that?
I think we should have conversation. I'd like to maybe go round robin and get everyone's perspective on, you know, the proposed goals, you know, what goals they want to discuss, and that way we kind of have an idea where everyone's sitting as far as formation in the process.
So I think you're in favor then of, rather than trying to synthesize stuff, you want to make sure that everybody has a chance to advance their own thoughts. When we go around the table, I think where everybody stands on that, and then we'll go around the table.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the rest of council, some of their perspectives on the goals and discussion for this workshop.
If that's what we're doing, right, this call. Councilmember Randall, how do you feel about that?
Can you come back to me on the
Councilmember Lawson?
I guess I was just confused because I thought that we did mediator, like say what our goals or what we wanted in the next year. So I didn't come with anything because I thought we were kind of discuss what we wanted, and then we were gonna, you know, like plan and add things that came. So I mean, if people don't feel like hurt and want to talk about it, that's fine. I just, you know, I just wanted to make sure we're moving forward or whatever. Thank you.
Is there any,
And Councilmember David and Councilmember Davis, how do you feel about sort of slowing down the process and just individually bringing your own visions to the table again and then starting continuing that?
Works for me.
Sounds good. So that being said, let's hear if you, so let's pretend that we're starting from scratch here. And Mayor Pro Tem Calvin is presenting what she thinks would be a really great start, or if she could wave a magic wand, I love that phrase. What would the council goals be if she could wave a magic wand? Can you present your thoughts on what the goals should be?
Yes, I'm happy to. So, each goal has generally 4 objectives, which are broken down. So we won't go into those into detail, unless free. Absolutely. Okay. So
Just 1 minute, I'm gonna interrupt. Councilman Glasser has a.
Yeah, so I think it's been a council goal for as long as I've been on to maintain like the officer retention for over a year. And I feel like that is something that we as a small town struggle with. So like, do you have suggestions for that? And that is something I really like.
Can we let her just present?
Oh, sorry.
That's her question. Yeah, I really want to make sure that we're not just looking at that part of the meeting is you presenting these so that the whole council and the people watching the meeting and the recording here with for the record, right? What you're and I would say go into as much detail as you need to get this presented fully in a way that really feels like you're sharing your thoughts.
okay, yeah. So my first goal is public safety, professional services, and community. And what that entails is also to look at public safety, meaning are we at the bare minimum in terms of police officers for safety? Do we need additional assistance? What is the retention? How do we maintain them and keep them for long-term employees? Also, in terms of staff, what do we do? How do we focus on reducing our high turnover? Right? Clearly, it's not based on financial, or it's not based on benefits. What is it in the environment that we need to change in order to retain long-term employees, which creates community trust when you have the same consistent staff that you can go to. So I hope that that's helpful. And also when we talk about, there seems to be in our current structure, because we have a strong mayor system, there's confusion, or it's unclear what are our roles, what are our staff roles? What is the administrator's role? How does that conflict with what the clerk's responsibility is? And I believe that that is part of the struggle that we have with not being able to retain staff, is that there seems to be ambiguity in regards to what our structure is. So having goals where we can be clear on what each job responsibility is. And then again, we are working towards creating a different environment here at the board by being honest and by making sure that we're being respectful. So I want to thank each and every one of you, because that's something that we're going to be, I think is an important goal that we review often, not just annually, but that we always review our goals to make sure that we're tracking the, what am I trying to say in these words? That we're tracking our progress, and that we just don't have goals and that we aren't able to see have we met them, where our challenges are, What can we modify to make sure that we meet them? Also, we talked about, here's something that is really important to me, that
The first goal was public safety, professional services, and community trust, and everything under that applies to that goal.
yes,
Okay, and then your next one was,
equitable and accessible infrastructure. So we really looked at, again, for the ADA, workshop, looking at our ADA gaps. That we look at, I think the big complaint is where we are with our curbs, our signage. We have to maintain, or how do we maintain detailed inventory of our assets, of our town infrastructure assets? How do we incorporate life cycle costing in capital decisions? So when we're making capital long, big investments, how are we looking at what that cost is going to be in the long term? Stewardship in future generations. Ensure decisions reflect the town's responsibility to future residents, that we're not keeping them, we're not leaving them with huge amounts of debt. The next one is sustainable growth and quality of life. To really look at the redevelopment of commercial corridors. I think we're all in alignment with that. Residential code updates and clarity and urgency. We need to really look at our legal liability management and provide training for council and staff on land use, decision-making, and risk management. So we're on our path. And neighborhoods serving businesses and gathering places. So not only our neighborhood, but the municipalities that are around us. How can we encourage services to help that review so that we're incorporating Tennyson, we're incorporating Wheat Ridge, we're incorporating Edgewater and Lakeside with some of the services that they have that we can't provide here. Responsible financial sustainability and stewardship.
sorry, I want to make sure that we, stick on track. The first one was the public safety, professional services, and community trust.
My apologies for not numbering them.
The second one was equitable and accessible infrastructure.
Yes.
And then each of that is broken down to have elements inside of it. And then the third one,
Sustainable growth and quality of life. Responsible financial sustainability and stewardship. So there is one more, it's communication, transparency, and accountability. Oh, I apologize. And then the last one is, yeah, intergovernmental and regional collaboration.
those are different categories. And there's a lot underneath those categories that apply. And then again, if we can hold up on the metrics, we all know that we want metrics. We want regular reporting, acting out in the facilitated conversation. We hear it in the people. We know we're gonna have, as part of the goal, moving forward. Measure and to report on. Okay, so that'll help us sort of streamline the conversation. But all of those categories make sense to me. People have questions.
I was just wondering, is the numbering for each objective, is that a priority or is it just numbering for numbers?
Thank you for asking. No, it's not for priority. It's just a general guideline. And then we as council can determine what we feel is a priority, if we choose any of these goals. And then we look at the four objectives.
Did you have this?
Our mission statement is Mountain View Town Council exists to represent and serve the community through ethical, transparent, and accountable governance. The council provides leadership that prioritizes public safety, reliable services, fiscal stewardship, and a welcoming, inclusive community. Collaboratively working to preserve the town's character while planning responsibly for the future.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I like the word stewardship. I think it's a very cold word. Evolve for me. I wrote stuff down like mission statement impacts how you treat other people, interact with race, respect, and class, and that we're a reflection of the residents of our town. Stewardship like this, everything.
Bureaucratic, maybe? Is that it?
It's too cold.
Oh. No, it's not warm.
It's not warm. I like warm.
Community focus. I really.
No, I would like to spend more time reviewing this. Otherwise, if we do it tonight, I would like to consider that to be considered. It's just a month. So, I guess I just want to first want to appreciate how comprehensive this is, and I really like the metrics, KPI kind of warm my heart a little bit. Yeah, and I guess I would maybe agree with Councilmember Randolph about, having more time to just digest these goals and kind of, think back on the last conversation that we had and how that mapped to these goals. And so I guess, one question I was wondering is, maybe instead of adopting the granular details, maybe our goals possibly could be just like simple headers. Just that, so we adopt some framework. Because I guess I'm just trying to think, how can we come to agreement, what the study does? We have to start somewhere. And I think this is a really good start. It's comprehensive and it really speaks to our small community and the needs of the town.
So, share your thinking.
So I was thinking about the mission statement and I guess from my perspective, having values in the mission statements, sometimes those could be subjective, like what is collaboration? So having like a kind of a fundamental statement with the mission of the town of Mountain View to protect public safety, preserve a small town character, and steward public resources responsibly through transparent decision-making and policies adopted by town council and implemented in accordance with the town charter. And I think the most important part from my perspective for a mission statement is for the benefit of the residents. That's kind of my perspective. What I wrote out in this letter, why take this approach? If I won't read that out loud. But it just seems to be, a very standard kind of governance and process-based mission. So my thinking is, a mission statement for the town, not just this current council, will really serve us like long term.
About that in terms of speaking for the town, because the point is, it really is a moving target. I'll have to give it some more thought, but my instinct is that historically why we've done this is to do it every year with the particular council, and you're not speaking with this body and your own, because each council has its own unique makeup and speaks in a different way as body changes. And so the concept is not to create a document that speaks for the town, but it's for the council. The charter speaks for it. We don't need to restate, like, you could restate that in your mission statement as a council, but it really changes the conversation if you say, we're not doing a mission statement for the council, we're doing a mission statement for the town. It's just a very different conversation. So we should be very clear about which should be. If you're doing a mission statement for the town,
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in a mission statement for a town that's gonna, is gonna be durable beyond just this current council.
mission statement for the town and a mission statement for the town. And there might be some overlap, but I think they're not mission things.
and also, I know you emphasized in your draft mission statement, did you read that?
Mhm.
That you ended it with for the benefit of the resident. So one of the things we talk about is, does the council want to emphasize that at the expense of other states? Because we've done a lot of work to incorporate and recognize all the stakeholders, like the ADA and about has been, do visits. Not everybody participated in that as a resident, not even all the voters. So there are property owners who vote here and who are, but they consider this their home, but they're proud. So we should think about that. That kind of word, if you said resident and all or something like that, then that incorporates not just it's all work that we do as a body is also for the benefit of our business. That's part of our fiduciary duty is to think about our business, and the work that we do is also related to drive to town to deliver packages. We maintain our streets, and so it's a broader category of people that I think that we work with, although we do obviously work with the voters. So I just wonder.
I mean, I think we can make it, I guess there's probably like a definition thing, what's the difference between constituents rather than community. So that's fully open to. I guess the main question is, how does council feel about the mission statement for the town versus council? And it also touches on, things like, what is the community? They have a mission statement and kind of inspiration for the technical safety for small town character
Outstanding, that's great. Get that from the company.
Raises an interesting question. Is having, inviting resident involvement in the shaping of council goals, and to what extent do we want to do that as a body? Because ultimately, resident or other stakeholders want to define your population, but it seems like there should be a voice there in terms of, how that impacts what we might also value. I mean, obviously, we have our own ideas, we've campaigned on different platforms and have different ideas, but I feel like ultimately we're serving the public in some way, shape, or form, whether that's, our business owners or our residents or other stakeholders. Inviting their feedback might be welcome in shaping our own personal goals as a property.
I do agree with that.
I guess, I was thinking about that too, and, really, if we create like a council mission statement, that probably speaks more to or how we want to govern. Versus like a, community mission statement, with like, what are the needs and desires and the community. They might be, I don't know if we would necessarily be able to adopt a community mission statement.
That's why this is that, but. The last meeting spoke to that, saying that the first meeting was to get all the next meeting, it would allow for input from the community during public comment, and then we would have another meeting and have public comment, and that's specifically why it wasn't like that. So I know it's been played out. That's clear. The public comment period is designed for that, and it's very much us. We do invite that, and then we specifically invite that. We have talked about, like, if you wave back on what was your vision, and I think part of the confusion might have been the term goal. I thought of the term, more visionary and aspirational, and I think all the different. And then say goals, I think people think of a to-do list. So that might have gotten off. It's conversational. At this point, is to have more of a vision statement, so that then we can get into the nitty-gritty of how do the projects, how does the strategic plan take out from that? How does each of the projects that we're working on, where do they fall into that? How do they support those bigger aspirational concepts? And then from there to bring in metrics. Think about the options that have been. Yeah, I think that's a lot of work that's done.
And I think to tag on to your comment about goals, for me, goals are measurable. How do we achieve that goal? We have to be able to measure that goal. And what I would like to see from the rest of council is that if they want to contribute what they feel would be goals that they would like to see. This is just, one spice that we're putting in the soup, so to speak. So it's important that we get all input from everyone. If you have something that you'd like to see that speaks to your heart and that you have, lively conversations with, again, I'm gonna go to the community and what they feel is important, and you also are like, yes, I agree with you, that's important to me as well. So having each of us contribute and then having a collaborative, this is 6 different opinions, and this is how we're coming together.
I like that idea.
Then put it on the agenda for the next workshop, where each council person will bring similar to council members, governor, and mayor pro tem on being their own written thoughts. That they're aspirational, that they're the biggest, right? They're not the list of projects. That comes from this work. And we should name it differently if the word goals doesn't.
I feel like we have a hard time because everyone has a different interpretation of certain meanings of terms. And so I come at it from a perspective like similar to yourself, where a goal is very aspirational and an objective is measurable. But the objectives are smart, you know, KPIs and that sort of thing. But then there's, you know, it's there's a lot of literature out there on both these topics, and people tend to use these terms interchangeably. So I think if we could maybe take a definitions of these terms and agree to them as a body and use them in that way, and that we would all start with more common sorts of language, I think that would help us a lot. So let's agree how to define what the goal is, how to define what an objective is, and then go from there. That's kind of what I'm thinking. We need a dictionary, a shared language here.
I agree.
So how would you, let's take the word goals and wipe it off this conversation. Let's say these aren't goals. If that word does become confusing. Can we talk about this as a vision statement? That's what we're drafting, a vision statement for this council so that it becomes aspirational and large. And it's a united force. We don't need to agree on all of the projects, because those are going to come to the table under this one. The vision or mission, I would be comfortable with that. And then we go and get more granular.
Just to clarify, you were asking for sort of like a couple sentences to a short paragraph that you're asking us to each individual council member to bring. So not necessarily categories, but they can include some categories, but sort of 3 to 5 sentences. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a vision statement, which is, 2 to 5 sentences that expresses what is your biggest shared objective, aspirational. Not trying to get to the which projects play with this, right? We're just saying, what are our shared objectives as a body in a perfect world where we get to accomplish? How do we actually, and then from there, these categories that Mayor Pro Tem are being created are like could fall under that, where you have these categories are important as part of that part. And then let's leave the detail from there off and have each proceed, the conversation becomes more detailed after we reach that larger vision. If we talk about it as a vision statement, I
think that, yeah, that makes a lot more sense in my mind. Then even in the examples that were provided in the packet, there's I think 3 examples of a mission, vision, and values. So maybe that just like a standard format that we adopt. Mission, vision, and values.
important, just so we have time to serve. I love all the work that, the council members have done here tonight and brought to the table, but it would be helpful to have it in a packet, so we can intend to like digest everything. So is there, can we set like a deadline for each council member to get it in? So we can have a productive conversation.
And also it's part of the record. What if we said, is we're gonna try to have the next workshop, which is February 2nd? Provided by January 21st at noon. Standard definition of those so that we have a shared understanding. Mayor Pro Tem.
And moving forward, this is something that I think we could model in our future workshops. That if we all have an understanding that having a workshop and that we bring in our own input prior to, so it is in the packet, that will give us all an opportunity to study each other's work and to be able to have efficient conversation.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Because I mean, that would really be value add is to do, you know, kind of do our research and collect our thoughts, share them in advance, and then we can come here for discussion of those thoughts.
Something Davis, one we have vision, mission.
Yeah, everybody doesn't know what we're doing, but I'll just try to take sort of the standard, the most standard version I can. And I'm sure that our. And. Okay, where are we in agreement? Great, we'll have that workshop, we'll have everybody talk in the packet. And we'll move it forward. Thank you. So with the next conversation on our workshop tonight is the draft council rules conversation. And again, I want to start with a little bit of context before we decide what to do with this agenda item. So generally, we have every January had council, the council at the time, review and update the rules. And sometimes that requires some major changes, and sometimes that requires some minor changes and adjustments. Historically, workshops have often occurred, it's been the last year or so that the town attorney has always been to workshop. That was at council's request. Before that, the town attorney wasn't always at the workshop, because no action is taken. Austin and I worked together on this draft of the rules. So he has seen his draft of the rules and participated in it. However, since a lot of the decision about the rules still depends on the council, we don't have, there's some pieces in that draft that aren't specific, that aren't solved. And over the past week, I received almost 30 emails. I've had almost 30 emails with on this topic and what should, whether or not, what should be on the agenda tonight, and whether or not how soon there was lots of conflicting information. There was all the special meetings, full of council, there's a lot of information. And my goal is to be consistently respectful of the body's the right to make decisions in a public meeting. That those decisions don't, I can't take direction from one person. I only listen to the body as a whole. And so the topic of whether or not to have a conversation about the rules without our town attorney here must be made here at this table in the public forum by the whole body. So that is why it's on the agenda for you to decide in this meeting. And that's really all I have to say about that. And then you guys can decide if you want to have that conversation, start that conversation in this workshop, or if you'd like to wait until the next meeting. And Councilmember D.
I don't know, maybe backtracking what we were just on, but, a couple of goals that I would like to see. Okay.
Vision and value statement. So that way you give it some context, but you're not specific about the exact project. Because every council member is gonna have projects that they're interested in, right? And we can work to get those projects, those specific projects that you're interested in working on to the table in a way that we work. But the first part is the larger aspirational idea. So that in the draft that I created, I tried to call it something like, that was the language list, but I connected it to sort of a larger goal of caring about, maintenance, construction, and making sure that it's accessible. So the snow removal is part of that larger goal. And having, affordability may be the larger goal of having the utility bill discount. But makes, and you create that document for the body to consider, you include those in that way. So that then when we get to working on those individual projects, we'll look back and connect that. But there are definitely, ways to have those conversations. In the future, they are in the future as individual projects that will have.
Um,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. I, just want to tag on to that and then I'd like to. Just let me, yeah, I just like to, we appreciate. I think the role of council though would be to really have our own unique ideas, I'm gonna stress that again. And then we all come to the table with our own thoughts and ideas so that we have lively discussions from council, right? I mean, we appreciate the mayor's ideas and thoughts. These can become the meat of our decision making needs to come from each individual.
You just have to sponsor, I agree. I think having lively discussion at the table, is honestly just a benefit for residents, I think. So the more, the more that we can individually come with our thoughts and then, work together to build consensus amongst the table, we'd be better off with the long term. Looking forward to more conversation. So for you, suggesting you include like more of the detailed action items in this job?
No, I think, your individual. And then to sort through it. In addition to. So that then, that's the root of how you work. And then you follow. You just have to say it and articulate it, and then we adopt it and then follow. Policy and procedure. It depends on how you say it, but keep your statement aspirational and large, and then we'll work through it. I don't want to say what I don't know what the words are going to look like. The concept of having the solutions come individually from each of you for the issues that we're working on at the table, and then sorting through it. Good concept. That's what this body wants to work on and how this body wants to work. We just have to figure out how to say it and then adopt it. And that can be part of the vision concept.
I have one more thing. I'm sorry.
One of the things we're thinking about is the budget and how we've been in deficit. How can we put that into our vision of the deficit map to make sure we do?
I don't agree that you're in debt. So we need to be careful about that term. We don't have a debt. We don't have a budget. I think what you're concerned about is that we are spending down the fund, the larger fund, that there's years when we don't take in as much money as we spend without, right? So, I think that term is fiduciary responsibility or.
Well, I got that from auditors. They say that you're in the deficit.
Maybe.
We are not operating with a balanced budget currently. So we are drawing down our general fund balance because we're spending more than what we're taking in. So the goal would to be to have a balanced annual budget where we spend exactly what we bring in. I don't know if we would get to a surplus situation in the next couple years, but you would be aiming towards a balanced budget.
Our policies, there are financial policies that we've adopted that we should share with the to make sure that everybody has it together. We put that on our to-do list and make sure we get that, so share. Okay. Other conversations about our goals, or let's start calling them mission, vision, and values. Other conversations about mission, vision, and values before we move on.
I'll just start out here. I think, I don't think we've done hardly anything in terms of as a town, in terms of like disaster management and planning. And there's again another huge fire with mandatory evacuations. These are more and more common with climate change. We've had whole towns in Colorado wiped out. I don't know that we have anything really in place except for the reserves. And that's the only thing I think we've got in place. So it'd be nice to have some long range planning for disaster management. And also to be part of the solution in terms of climate action planning and sustainable development.
It's interesting you bring it up, because I just stumbled across on, it's like a resiliency toolkit that the state has available. I'm not sure where town council has had conversations, but I'm imagining not, sounds like. So how do we imagine distilling each of our individual mission, vision, values into one? Is it see, how many people's statements are like essentially the same, and then go with the majority there, or a voting method? Just kind of curious, maybe it's worth having a conversation about how that process is. I guess one thought is kind of like a voting sort of way of generating consensus. So if we all pick any value or resiliency, so if we all had resiliency in our vision, mission, and value statement, then there's consensus. So that would be that way. I don't know if it's like word by word, or maybe four of us will show up with the exact same thing. That would be ideal.
Maybe with me also just sort of not knowing is part of the process. That because we really do want to listen, you want to, what I'm hearing everybody saying, they want to hear what each individual council member, people, and assimilate, really hear it. And if we start thinking about how are we going to get together, we don't even know what each individual. Like, can we just let that happen first, then have a conversation about how to work together to advance one stuff. We can say, you feel right.
Yeah, I'm just curious if there's.
We're gonna have it in the top. Each individual is gonna have their unique vision. So then we'll know that in the team.
And I'll share a standard definition for each of us. Yeah. How other people are thinking about. The draft council rules conversation, agenda item number 6. I think I shared some background, and the question is, would council like to pause this conversation and until our town attorney is present? Or would council like to continue to have a workshop that is about the rules? Mayor Pro Tem.
I actually did not bring the attached information based on the email that we received from a partner at the law firm suggesting that we do not.
Which is confidential.
I apologize, I was not aware.
So that's why I'm asking, would council like to have a conversation about the rules in a workshop, or would you prefer to wait for the town attorney to be here to have that conversation?
I prefer to wait.
I would,
I also.
I'd like to be responsible here.
That means that